What's up? I'm Chad Littlefield, and I found this couch in the middle of a jungle, and I'm here in this video to give you a little mini masterclass in what skills you need to be a facilitator. I actually used to teach 2 facilitation courses at Penn State University. One was a team development and leadership development facilitation course, and another was a dialogue facilitation course. And now my job is getting hired by some of the coolest organizations and universities on the planet to train them how to facilitate really meaningful events, conversations, meetings, gatherings. And so in this video in particular, I'm gonna unpack 3 of the most essential core skills that you need to be a really great facilitator. And I like to just get down to it, not a lot of fluff, so let's get into it. So just to get clear, facilitation is a very big word. And so what do I mean when I say facilitation? There are lots and lots of types of facilitation. In my world, in my brain, in my experience, there are 3 major types of facilitation. So one, I mentioned I taught a team development, leadership development facilitation course. For me, that falls into the category of experiential facilitation. Some people call it adventure education, outdoor education. And that whole world is about facilitating experiences for people to learn by doing. And so it's a really fantastic way of education. I fell in love with it the first time I was introduced to it by one of my mentors, Rod Lee. And the reason that I love it so much is you can teach people all the things that you're expected to know, but never taught. And there are no classes on them. So you can teach things like conflict resolution and communication and problem solving and some of these more conceptual ideas that are essential to a high functioning team or organization or individual. But you can teach them through activity, through exercise. And so that activity usually has directions, the group is solving something together, right? So that's one area of facilitation. And that is part of my work, and part of what I love to do is create experiences that teach people all the things that they're expected to know but never taught. The second sliver of facilitation, I would say, falls into a bucket of dialogue facilitation. And this comes from my work working with an organization called World in Conversation. And my job was to sit in a circle with about 10 other strangers and talk about stuff that strangers usually never talk about. Really soft, fluffy topics like race relations, long-term conflict, politics, religion, etc. for 90 minutes for the sole purpose of gaining a better understanding of the other, building bridges rather than walls. And in that form of dialogue facilitation, there's a whole different kind of skill set required to be in that space, to hold the neutrality for a whole bunch of very diverse, sometimes conflicting opinions to exist in the same space, but land at the ultimate outcome of understanding and connection. And so that's the second sliver of facilitation, dialogue facilitation. The third sliver of facilitation, which is maybe how you ended up on this video, is a more general term. It's like a business meeting. And when you say, oh, hey, Tim, can you facilitate the meeting? Or, oh, yeah, I'll just facilitate the meeting. That usually means that person's gonna run the meeting, which doesn't always include lots of these skills from sliver 1 and 2. In fact, I think that oftentimes facilitating a business meeting or a staff meeting or a faculty meeting usually looks a little bit more like the boss just telling you a bunch of stuff, asking for a report out, you kind of shrugging and saying like, I don't really know what to report out. I don't know why we're doing this. I don't know why I'm here, but I don't want to get fired, so I'm just going to keep sitting here. That's a facilitation that I would like to stay away from. And the skill sets that exist in both this experiential facilitation and dialogue facilitation can greatly improve upon and help that third bucket of just like facilitation. Just a side note, if you're watching this, this is an overgeneralization, but I find that women tend to be far better facilitators. And I don't know if it's because of the 3 skills that I'm going to share, but there's a way that when you talk about that business facilitation, like it's usually a guy that's just like stomping over everybody's opinions. I think really great facilitation is not really front and center and in your face. It's not as intense as leading a meeting maybe over here. There's a certain grace to it of being able to direct traffic, direct opinions, move things forward, that you're almost like this really eloquent traffic cop or like a, I don't know, an interpretive dancer or something as a facilitator. Here are the 3 core skills that I would say you've got to have to be a really phenomenal facilitator. These are not all the skills required to be a great facilitator. So core skill number 1, as I unpack these 3, these are not all the skills you need to be a great facilitator, but number 1 is authenticity. If you try to be somebody else when you're facilitating, it won't work well. And in fact, it'll create an immense amount of resistance. When people see that somebody's like has a mask on and is trying to get them to do things, everybody will be very happy fighting and pushing against that. So you want to be really mindful that you're yourself. You've got to maintain that level of authenticity, which for me doesn't mean necessarily being more energetic or being less energetic. It means being who you are, because even people with the lowest emotional and social intelligence on the planet can spot authenticity or fakeness from a mile away. Personally, one of the ways that I've experienced this that actually kind of frustrated me earlier, so I started We and Me 7 years ago, and in the first year, I was doing a lot of speaking and keynoting, and still do a lot of speaking and keynoting, and still to this day, 100% of the time that I give a talk, virtually or in person, someone comes up to me or chats me the exact sentence, "Oh, Chad, I love your energy. Oh, Chad, I love your energy." And that used to actually really frustrate me because I was like, thanks, but that's not feedback. Like, I can't do anything with that. And then what I realized was there was some part of my genuine humanity that got through to them. And the best language that they were able to use to describe it was, "Oh, Chad, I like your energy." What a valuable takeaway. And for me, I think really great facilitators take their strengths and put them forward. And so for me, I've stopped being frustrated and annoyed by that and said, cool, my energy. This is what I bring to the group. This is part of the value that I can't put into a fee or into a whatever. Like, this is who I am. And when I bring that authentic self to a Zoom meeting or a conference room or anywhere else, it changes the dynamic. The possibilities that exist in that room change when you bring that authenticity into the room. Core skill number 2 is clarity. You can be a really well-intentioned facilitator, but if your instructions aren't clear, if your guidance isn't clear on how to participate, if the rules of the game aren't clear, you're gonna have a mess on your hands, and you're gonna be a street sweeper trying to clean up that mess rather than a really great facilitator going back to that person who's kind of directing traffic and working that room or grid, I guess, if you're in gallery view. Both books that I've worked on have touched on, one has touched on experiential facilitation. It's called the Pocket Guide to Facilitating Human Connections. And then the other one on dialogue facilitation, on how to ask powerful questions and create conversations that matter. Both have elements of clarity, but specifically in this one, we share a framework called F.O.G.S. Me and Rod, the mentor I mentioned earlier, came up with this framework, and it very simply stands for framing, objective, guidelines, and safety. And really great facilitators inherently, without even thinking about it, go through that F.O.G.S framework to keep people out of the fog, to make it more clear. You see what I did there? Yeah. To make it more clear and salient for people what's going on. And so framing is where you help to kind of situate the context. Context matters a whole lot, right? If I tell you to think of something red, did you think of something red? You might have thought of something. If I tell you to think of something that is red and within 10 feet of your location, right, something else comes to mind. That is me changing the context. And so framing, you've got to change the context and make it relevant for everybody. And so you know your group, your team, your organization better than I do, but a really great way of framing is by sharing a story that leads into the purpose or objective of whatever you're doing, whether it's a conversation or an experience or anything else. The second piece, objective, is a really lovely element that I think is left out sometimes. And an objective also in and of itself has the ability to gamify an experience or maybe even a conversation to some extent. It gives it a purpose. Let's be in this space for this time, for this objective. Whether sharing that objective is just sharing the purpose or your aim or goal in an activity. So it might be to score 10 points. It might be to, from a dialogue facilitation perspective, the objective might be to share your stories withholding all opinions though. So to just share stories that are personal for you, but to not let your opinions filter into that. Because usually people get into fights about race relations or politics or religion or long-term conflict because opinions are shared back and forth, but very rarely are personal stories entering the scene. And so when you give people that objective, it totally changes the name of the game. And just that alone can make you a better facilitator. Now, taking objective one step further, down to the G, is guidelines. And this is where you're offering some rules of engagement. Priya Parker talks a lot about how creating rules is actually really beneficial. I was listening to a podcast the other day that she was sharing, and the example she gave was this mom's group meetup that had a hard and fast rule that if anybody talked about their kids, they had to take a shot. And so it was that idea of when you create that rule, it changes the game and it adds something really special and interesting to it, as opposed to like just a mom's meetup. You've got a mom's meetup who, if kids are in the picture, they've got to take a shot. There's two totally different gatherings in that context. And so that's a really valuable element to take away is sometimes adding rules in actually makes your gathering better. And then the last one, safety, has two components, physical safety and psychological and emotional safety. And great facilitators are masters at tuning in to that. And so from the physical safety element, if you're doing something that's gonna have people running around, moving, like you don't want people tripping over chairs, no trips to the ambulance, that would make you a bad facilitator perhaps. Although there was a scenario where I was facilitating an exercise and somebody did dislocate a shoulder. That was quite a fluke incident and there was an ambulance involved. I guess we learned from our mistakes. So the physical safety, wanting to be really aware of that, tuned into that. That's like low-hanging fruit, keep people safe. The psychological and emotional safety, a lot of people who run meetings don't even mention or acknowledge or think about the psychological and emotional safety. And yet, as I've said over and over and over again, the number one predictor of high-performing innovative teams is the degree of psychological safety in that team. And so if you can, as a facilitator, do everything in your power to increase that psychological safety, you will find a much more impactful gathering happening. Third core skill to be a really phenomenal facilitator is listening. My business partner Will's old Gmail used to be wiselistening@gmail.com. And his last name happens to be Wise, so there's something clever about that. But he embodies that. He's taught me so much about listening. And to be a really great facilitator, it's not about the performance in the front of the scenes and how people see you. It's about what you hear and what you do with that information. Really great facilitators don't just listen to the words that somebody's saying. They listen to the fears that are present in the room. They listen to the aspirations people have. They listen to the core message. They listen to the process that's going on, right? So if someone's repeating themselves over and over in a meeting, it's because they don't feel heard. And so a really great facilitator will jump in and reflectively listen and say back what they hear that person saying and ensure that everybody else really hears that concept. The way that you listen has the power to change what people say. And I mean that very literally. The way that you listen actually has the power to change what words come out of people's mouth. If you're listening like, come on, people will speak less and less authentically. If you listen and you really are careful in the way that you're listening and you really want to hear what somebody has to say, they will share more, you will learn more, the ideas that will be out on the table in the organization will go up. There's some magic that happens when you listen really carefully. If this was nice for you and you enjoyed learning these 3 skills and you want to extend upon it, this is what I get to do professionally for a living. And so if you want to set up a train the trainer or a facilitation training for your group on how to make virtual engagement easy or how to just make engagement easy, not pixelated engagement, reach out. I think my info is below in the description. And if you're not ready to take the relationship to the next level there's a ton of free resources. In fact, we created this whole connection toolkit that has a couple card decks and both the books that I mentioned that can absolutely take your facilitation up a notch for a much cheaper price as well. I'm not a particularly cheap date. Thanks for hanging out in cyberspace with me. Have an awesome day.